Hey, this is the Build and Learn series where I'm mashing up learning SolidWorks with Lego. The first Lego set in this series is the 3-in-1 Creator Off-Road Buggy. And the first lesson I'm about to show you today is how to create a simple 2x2 plate. At least I thought it would be simple. Now in this lesson, you'll see two different tutorials for that plate. The first one will come up very early, and that shows you the basics of how to build it with very simple dimensions, which we've come to at the end of the project. But I'm showing you now so that you don't have to go through the same pain I did in trying to work out how everything's going to fit together. After that short tutorial, there's another one which shows you the learning process of how I was measuring and detailing that part, and more importantly, how I created multiple configurations in the one file so that we could have a 2x2, 2x3, 2x4, etc. plate all in the one part file. Hope you enjoy. We're going to start with one of the most basic parts, a simple 4-brick. And the reason we're starting with this one, so very first part, will be to set up the dimensions in the right way, set us up for configurations so that we can use the same file to create something like this. We're going to go to as much detail as we can with these models as well. Understand that Lego dimensions aren't public. We will rely on some measurements of our own and information available on the internet. As a project, it doesn't matter if we're not millimeter perfect, but we'll try and get pretty close. So let's get into it. So let me show you now how we can actually model this simple 2x2 brick. We're going to start a new part. Okay, so we'll just do it fresh, and I will take this one slow for those that haven't got a lot of experience with SolidWorks yet. There's 4 key steps to create this brick if you exclude the configurations. And all sketches can be done on the top plane, but we will use some other faces as we go to create some of the other details. On the top plane, we start a new sketch. We're going to start with the bricks, the studs that are on top, because it's those that actually drive a lot of the assembly in the Lego. To do that, we're going to create one of those circles on the top. Now those circles have a diameter of 4.8 and a height of 1.6, but we'll come back to the height in a minute. Now on this 2x2 brick, we're going to have 4 of these studs, and they're symmetrical around the front plane and the right plane. Now we can mirror the sketch on one side, and then we can also use the front plane to mirror the sketch on the other side. And then we just need to add the dimensions. And the key dimension for the Lego parts that we're building in our series is 8mm. And this goes against some of the other information online where the gaps might be like 8.12mm and that sort of thing, which you'll see if you continue the video a bit later. 8 is nice and simple, and it works really well for what we're going to do. And we're going to put that 8mm dimension in both directions. Okay, so that is our stud pattern. The other thing we're going to do is a center point rectangle on the outside of this, and this is the outside shape of the brick. We're going to do both of these in the one sketch. And the dimension rule that we will use for creating our bricks across this series is 1 brick is 7.8mm. And then every extension, every time you go 1 brick more, that's add on another 8. So for this size, it's actually 15.8 by 15.8. What that means is when you get 2 bricks side by side, which are connected onto another brick that might be longer above or below, there's a little gap between those 2 bricks of 0.2mm, which is pretty close to reality, okay, and enough for what we're doing. Okay, so that's our first sketch. We're then going to do an extrude. Now, because I've got multiple sketch contours in here, by default, SolidWorks selects the open contour, which is this internal area, which is fine. We're going to change the height to 3.2mm. Press OK. And then we're going to reselect that sketch. We're going to go and hit extrude again, but this time we're going to change the selected contour by clearing what is in there, selecting the 4 circles, and changing the height to add another 1.6mm. So it will be 4.8. And that is the outside of our brick. Nice and simple. Now, to add the other detail on the other side, we're going to do a shell. The thickness is 1.2mm. You click on the bottom face. You can click show preview if you like. Press OK. That removes the material for us. And then the very last step is a central wall, which is 4.8 on the outside with an 0.8mm thickness, and that is an extrude that is going to go from that face back to this bottom surface here. And there in 4 steps, we've created a very simple 2x2 Lego plate. All right. Now, configurations, additional details, I'm going to show throughout the rest of the project. So for that, please follow along. But to get started, as far as a shortcut goes, this is a nice, easy way to get into the project. Okay. From here, I'll put you back on the timeline. If you want to skip all the fluffing around, then just look at the timestamps, go to the assembly point, or jump into the next lesson. See you there. So we're going to start with this part. Now, the part number for this one, if I have a look here, we are number 302201. Now, if you go to bricklink.com, you can actually search for that part, and you're able to come here and see a preview as well as see a 3D view part. Now, this model doesn't have the same level of detail as the real part. Just give you a little idea about what we're about to create. And we're going to work through to build that as closely as possible. Now, we do have some information here on Lego dimensions. I'm going to use this information as a guide for our sizes. We'll do some of our own dimensions too, to just validate those. And once we set with a size, once we determine our dimensions, we'll try and keep that consistent across all of our parts. All right, so let's get into it. You go to SolidWorks, and I'm using, for this series, to start, SolidWorks 2023, but whatever version of SolidWorks you're on, a lot of the tools and techniques will be pretty similar. All right, now, we're going to start with this one on the top plane, and we will need to give some thought to how we will expand this part for configurations, because obviously you can have a part like this with 4, so you can have 2, you can have 4, you can have 3, you can have very long ones, you can have angled ones, long ones with a gloss finish without the brick top in the middle of them. I think the general rule that we'll go with is we'll stick to a width, and then we can increase that number of widths. I don't want to build one part configuration for all of these, but I think if we stick with this one and say these would be all in the same part file and these ones would be different part files, I think that's probably a good place to start. So let's start with this 2x2, and let's use our calipers to get some dimensions. So I'm going to use 2x2 there. Now when I measure this, I'm getting about 15.8 millimeters. All right, so I'm going to use as many efficiency measures as I can in building this. Mouse gestures, keyboard shortcuts, auto dimension inputs. There will be a separate video, check link in description, on how to use all those measures. I won't go through them in every single video of the series. So we're using a center point rectangle. I'm going to type in our number 15.8. We press the tab key and press 15.8 again. And then we get our 2 dimensions entered. And because it was the same dimension, it automatically adds the equal relation. Now let's just cross-check that against this. And look, we get 15.8. So that's fantastic. Then we get a height of 3.2 millimeters. So that's going to be our next step. We're going to do an extrude, 3.2. Now let's just measure to check. Yeah, 3 points. Okay, that is our base. Now we'll do our head of the brick. That is going to be a circle, and I can measure the diameter of one, which is just under 5 millimeters. What does it say here? 4.85. 4.85. And there's a few options for patterning this now. Let's start with a circular sketch pattern. And if we look at the dimension between circles, it is approximately 8.12. So let's put that in, and I'm going to make the center point of those horizontal. So I held the control key when I did that. And I'm going to grab the center point of the pattern and drop that on the origin. Now, just cross-checking against these dimensions. This also has a 1.35 millimeter gap to the edge. Now, if I want to get that dimension here, hold Shift key. And say I'm getting 1.42. It's just a little bit different than this fellow's dimensions here, but I'm happy with that for now. Let's round this to 8.1, and then the next step to extrude them, and it says 2 millimeters. So we're going to extrude up, blind extrude. There is the top of our brick. Now, if we do a measurement with our calipers, we should be getting 5.2, getting a little bit under that. I'm getting 3.2 for the bottom and then 1.8 for the top. Let's go with 1.8. All right. Now that's the very start of our brick. It looks pretty good, but there's obviously a lot of detail to go. But it is at this point we can consider configurations. And I'm also going to consider saving the part. Now, so the name of the part, I'm going to look it up on Bricklink, and it names it as a plate 2x2. So we're going to name this file as a plate 2x. So I'm going to go to my files, I'm creating a folder, and you can see this is my very first part in the folder, plate 2x, save. Now the reason I'm doing 2x is because if it's 2x2, I will have that in the configurations, or if it's 2x3 or 2x1, we'll just keep that information in custom properties, which we will configure later and link to the configurations. So at this point now, before we go and add the rest of the detail here, let's think about how we can create a configuration from this file to get these two different versions of parts in the most simplest way. We don't want it to just be able to double this, because we do want to be able to do a 2x1, 2x3, 2x5. So it really has to be incremental increases. The other thing that would be good to see, but might be difficult, is that the right plane would stay in the middle of the part. So any extension would actually happen both sides. Now that distance between here to the right plane in the middle is 4.05. Over here to this edge is 3.85. Now I don't know if there's any way that we can check that that's going to be correct. I can do some measuring, but even then, it's such a small dimension that it's tricky to get that kind of accurate with here I've got analog calipers. So I'm just having a look at these parts and the detail in them and thinking about how we create the rest of what we can see. The holes that are in the very bottom of the part, you can see here, they're done by a shell feature. I'm fairly certain, which means that if we created the whole configuration, so if we went from 2 bricks to 4, and then we had a shell feature, that would take care of all those small holes for us. It's these larger holes then that we'd have to add separately. We're starting with 1 on the 2x2, and then what would happen is for these ones, we could add design table in there, which controls how many repeats we have or how far this extends out, and also the number that there would be of this pattern of what would be an extruded dim. Let's give that a go. Okay, so let's do the shell. So I'm going to hit shell 1.2, and that's 1.2 from our reference document here, 1.2. Drop that on the bottom face, press OK. We can see those holes are good. And we may as well add our thin wall feature on the bottom here too. So we can see here it's got a diameter of 3, actually it doesn't say. Yes, it does. 6.72. 6.72 and 5.12. Let's draw them both. I prefer to just have thickness. Looks good. Now, I'm pretty certain that goes all the way to the bottom. Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to extrude that. That's going to come down to this surface here. Beautiful. Now, let's try a configuration. So the default is 2x. We want to add a configuration which is going to be 2x3. Now, in 2x3, what we're going to do is roll up above the shell. We're going to extend and just find that 2x3 bricks. Go. So we've got all 3. We're going to extend this face out. Now we could extend, or we can change a dimension on bottom. We'll experiment and see what works the best. Let's go to the top view. And I know I said before about keeping the right plane in the middle of the part. I don't think we need to worry about that. I actually think it'll be easier if we just leave it as is. Now, so when I measure for 3, I'm getting a measurement of 23.8. I want to see how this works out against a 2. So I'm just going to add some construction lines. All right, what we can see here, so there's a difference of 0.05 from that circle perfectly being in the middle of the 3. That would suggest to me that we need to move this one out to 8.15. No, that is wrong. It's too far. Let's take it in. A bit of maths going on here. So if it's going to be perfectly in the center, then the easy way to locate it, let's just change this to driven for a second. It's actually just draw a construction line here. It's here, but just off. Get the center point to be on this line. And midpoint of that line, that's going to be correct. Draw another line here. So midpoint of this one and this one with vertical. So it makes it 7.90. So that's a little bit different from what we see here, where it was 8.12. We can do some more dimensions to verify some of these details. So like if I'm measuring one of those circles, it's about 4.85. if I'm measuring the outside of 2 circles, getting about 13.8. So if I hold shift, 12.75. Let's check that again. It's 12.8. Yeah, sorry, 12.8. So that's right. All right, so I'm pretty comfortable with that dimension. Press OK. Now we should find where this dimension was 15.8. This one should equal the same length as that. And now you can see there's no gap between them. It's perfectly in the center. So press OK. This will be an extrude up to surface. And then using this sketch, we can go on the top plane. We can draw a construction line here, because the aim with our configuration, we don't want to use any dimensions except for that very first one. So this one will have an equal diameter, and then we're going to mirror about the front plane, and to mirror this, and this one going to extrude up to this surface. All right. The shell still happens on this face, and then we have our boss extrude, but now we will have a linear pattern for the boss extrude. Now that linear pattern will be the distance that we've extended out that edge. 7.9 is our magic number. Linear pattern, it's going to go in line with the right plane, spacing 7.9. In this configuration, it's only going to be 2. Okay, that's looking pretty good. Let's save, and let's check how our configuration works. If we go back to the default configuration, we go back to 2x2, we go to 2x3, so I get this. Now, if we've done this all correctly, set it up correctly, when we add a new one, which is 2x4, we can now go into this extruded section here and this extruded section here. We can add a new linear pattern on the right plane and increase the number. It's going to be 2 on this version. The shell is the same. Boss extrude is the same. The linear pattern, we're going to edit this feature, and we're going to say in this configuration, we're going to do 3. Right, now let's just check our dimensions while we're here. The example was 31.9. If I click on this edge here, I can see it's 31.6. I'm a little bit under. If I measure my own, it's definitely a bit closer to 31.9. Right, so we have to tweak to get that. We're spending a bit of extra time on this first one because we want to get it spot on. So if it's 15.8 that way, like if you halve 31.9 divided by 2, it's 15.95, which means a 2x2 square should be 15.95. It definitely looks like 15.8 though. And I guess there's always a bit of room for a gap tolerance, because if it was exact, you'd never fit the parts on. Like if I look at these parts here up close, I can see that there's a gap between them. Very small, but it's there. So we need to allow for that. I think that's what this kind of says. So when you expand it out, you're always getting a little bit bigger. So this suggests 15.8 plus 15.8 it's a 0.3 gap. So it's a 0.15 gap for every additional line. It's tricky, right? But we're trying to work out our maths here. 0.15. So that one's okay. I'll come back to that. This one here, it's not going to be equal. How can we, well, we can just give it a dimension, plus 0.15. Okay, and then we want to get these holes in the right spot, because we know now that's 0.8 off. That has to be in the center. So for that to be in the center, this cannot be there. It has to be out a little bit, and that's where the 8.12 comes in. So let's go back to the 8.12, see how that fits here. 0.04. What that 0.04 means is that this circle here, it's mid-plane there, between here and here, this one to this one, 8.12, this one to this one, 7.87. And it's not right. It's not going to continue on in the right dimension. Good maths going on. So that doesn't seem right either. Okay, so they're all fine. I wonder if they're any different. They can't be different, can they? Like, are the bricks on a 2-hole any different to a 4-hole? No. It's just a gap. It's just a gap. We just have to allow for the gap. And I think the gap's 0.15. Just going to draw that gap in. All right, so it shouldn't be mid-plane there. It should be mid-plane of this one. It's still not right. But I think that's, damn, it's this. I have to roll back to 3 wide, 23.9, 4.06. Pretty close. All right, let's roll back and use our reference dimensions. 8.12, 8.12. That's all fine. 8.85. I don't want to use this one. If we move that, can we say from here to here, 1.42? So read the same as here to here. Puts it at 805. It's still 7.9 there. It needs to be 8.12. Well, that just has to go in line with this, not on the midpoint of the line. Don't even need that. Size, and the same as that one. It's not bad dimension. Good. Okay, 8.12, 8.05, 0.12. Should it be bigger than this? Should it be another 0.7 bigger? I think that's the key. That's the distance between the holes and the extended distance of the brick. 8.12. So then between this brick and this brick should be 8.12. And this brick and this brick should be 8.12. And then the full width, we're going to get 32, 31.9. Pretty close. Shell. Holes in the bottom, easy. These holes. All right. I think we're done. I think we have resolved it. Default 2x2, 2x3, just hiding these sketches, and then 2x4. And then what we should be able to do is look at the design table, show table, and here, it's been a while since we've used this, but let's see if we can use the design table, create a new configuration, 2x5, and D1 is going to change to 4, and let's go apply. Okay. Didn't work. New pattern is this new pattern here, linear pattern number 2. This configuration goes to 3, 2x4, 2x3, 2x5. Let's try that again. So we can see we've got now D1 and D2. So if we want 2x6, we're going to add, this one's going to go up, and this one's going to go up. Go apply. Okay, 2x6. Yes. All right. And that will be it for the first lesson. Now, actually, let me just finish off. I've got this 2x8 here. I've got a 2x8 part. So we'll just finish off 2 more configurations. 2x7. We're going to go +1, +1. And I'm going to go 2x8, 7, and 6. Apply. Okay. We just check the configurations and they're looking awesome. Do we add the Lego text? Maybe another day. Maybe we'll look at a detailed day. Not time, but yeah, that's it for the first one. Stay tuned for more. Like and subscribe. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, great. That part is done. Let's move on. Hey, thanks for watching all the way to the end. Really appreciate that. This has been the Lego Build and Learn series by Fully Defined. If the next video has been released, it'll be on the top link to your right. Please hit the thumbs up and subscribe, and leave a comment below with what you'd like to see next. Your feedback is what motivates me to provide more content. See you in the next one.